Have you ever found yourself thinking about someone a little more than usual, but you can't quite explain why? You tell yourself it's just casual, just friendly, maybe it's admiration, but something in your body is telling a different story. A flutter, a rush, a moment of tension when they're close. You haven't labeled it yet, you haven't even admitted it to yourself, but your body already has. Attraction can often take root in places we least expect. Sometimes, long before we consciously recognize it, our bodies have already made decisions that our minds are still trying to catch up to. You might think you're just enjoying someone's company, that it's purely friendly or professional, that there's nothing more to it. But then a glance lingers longer than it should. A joke feels more electric than it ought to, and suddenly there's this strange tension you can't quite explain. You brush it off, you tell yourself it's nothing, but deep down something is already shifting. The truth is, sexual attraction doesn't always announce itself with obvious signs. It doesn't always show up as desire in its most recognizable form. It can creep in slowly, masked as curiosity, admiration, or even irritation. And this is where things get tricky, because when attraction operates beneath the surface, you don't even know it's coloring your behavior. You find yourself thinking about him more than others, but you justify it. You text him first, laugh at his jokes louder, stand a little closer, but you write it off as coincidence. What's really happening is that your subconscious is speaking in subtle cues. Tone of voice, body language, the way your energy changes around him. These aren't just passing moments, they're signals, biological, emotional, and psychological. Your brain is processing data, his scent, his tone, his facial expressions, and drawing conclusions you might not be aware of. This is especially true when you feel emotionally safe with someone. Safety is an incredible amplifier for desire. If you've been emotionally starved, even a small moment of being truly seen or heard can spark a physical response you didn't see coming. You might confuse it for friendship, for kindness, for warmth, but underneath, it might be more than that. It might be a sign that your body is already several steps ahead. What makes this even more powerful is that attraction that hasn't yet reached the surface often carries more intensity. It's unspoken, unexplored. There's mystery in it, and that mystery fuels a kind of psychological loop. You start looking for moments, and then you start creating them. And all the while, you still tell yourself nothing's going on. But your habits begin to shift. You start dressing a little differently when you know you'll see him. You remember the things he says more vividly. You find yourself wondering what he's doing, who he's with. And still, you haven't called it what it is. You haven't said it out loud. But your attraction is already alive, already pulsing just beneath the surface, shaping how you feel, what you say, how you behave. This is why understanding the subconscious nature of attraction is so important, because it's not about whether you know it's happening. It's about becoming aware of how often it happens without your permission. Not to shame it or fear it, but to recognize that you are constantly responding to cues, often before you're even conscious of what they mean. Your body is a far more accurate reader of chemistry than your conscious mind. Long before you've had the chance to analyze your feelings or weigh the pros and cons of your connection with someone, your nervous system is already picking up subtle signals. The tilt of his head when he listens to you, the warmth in his voice, the way his presence changes the air around you. All of these are interpreted at a physical level first. You might not even be fully aware of what's happening, but your body is reacting in real time. It tightens, opens, leans in, or pulls away, based on the information it's receiving, long before you've consciously labeled it as attraction. This explains why you can walk away from a conversation with someone and feel strangely energized, flustered, or even confused without being able to pinpoint exactly why. That confusion is your logical brain trying to catch up with what your body already knows. It's not always obvious in the moment, but later, When you find yourself replaying that interaction or wondering why he's suddenly so present in your thoughts, the truth starts to surface. Your body had already responded, already felt the spark, already logged it as meaningful. This kind of instinctive response is deeply rooted in human biology. From an evolutionary perspective, we're wired to detect compatibility, safety, dominance, fertility cues, all without conscious reasoning. So while you might think you're just having a friendly conversation, your body might already be reacting to pheromones, voice resonance, or the rhythm of mutual communication. It could be as subtle as the feeling of wanting to stay just a few seconds longer in his presence, or noticing that your heart rate picks up when he walks into the room. These things are. It's also why we sometimes deny our own attraction, because it didn't arrive with a logical explanation. There's no checklist we can point to. He may not be your type. You may not even want him. And yet there it is, a feeling you can't quite shake, a desire you didn't plan for. This disconnect between what we feel and what we admit to ourselves can be disorienting. But the more we deny the body's role in attraction, the more confused we become about our own intent. We start intellectualizing something that began at a much deeper level. The body's intelligence isn't just instinctual, it's emotional. It reacts to how seen, valued, and understood we feel in someone's presence. If someone makes you feel desired, accepted, or emotionally safe, your body might respond with arousal, even if your mind hasn't labeled the moment as sexual. This is where many people get caught off guard. They think desire should always be preceded by conscious thought, but in reality, our physical responses often lead the way, pulling our awareness behind them. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss how powerfully your body is shaping your perception of someone long before your thoughts catch up. Emotional safety is one of the most underestimated triggers for physical attraction. We tend to associate sexual chemistry with purely physical traits, looks, voice, posture. But in reality, the foundation of true desire is often built on something far less visible. When you feel emotionally safe with someone, something inside of you relaxes, walls come down, you stop performing, stop filtering yourself, and begin showing up more authentically. That shift doesn't just open your heart, it opens your body. Suddenly, someone who felt neutral before starts to become more appealing, more magnetic, more charged with possibility. What happens in those moments is subtle but incredibly powerful. When a man creates a space where you feel heard, seen, and accepted, your body starts responding in ways you may not immediately understand. There's a softness that emerges, a leaning in. You laugh more easily, breathe more deeply, your voice changes slightly. You find yourself maintaining eye contact a bit longer than usual. This isn't a performance, it's a biological response to a perceived sense of emotional safety. And that safety often creates the perfect condition for desire to grow. Quietly, gradually, and sometimes unexpectedly. The paradox is that people think of sexual attraction as something dangerous, wild, or chaotic, but for many, it only fully emerges when they feel safe. Not safe as in bored or emotionally detached, but safe as in trusted, valued, respected. When someone sees through your layers and doesn't flinch, when they allow you to be complex and flawed without pulling away, something awakens inside of you. It's not just comfort, it's connection. And that connection can lead to a desire that feels deeper, more grounded, and more undeniable than anything based on superficial chemistry alone. This is why someone you never considered attractive before can suddenly feel irresistible after a single meaningful conversation. When someone gives you that space to be fully yourself and stays present with you through it, your body registers it as intimacy. And intimacy is often a doorway to physical attraction. Even when you're not consciously thinking about sex or romance, even if you're just thinking you've met someone who gets you, the physiological response can begin. Your pupils dilate, your heart rate shifts, you lean in more. These are micro reactions, but they add up quickly. It's also why emotional safety can be confusing. You might assume that what you're feeling is just gratitude or appreciation, especially if you're not used to being around people who genuinely hold space for you. But underneath that appreciation, desire can start to build, not always in dramatic ways, but in those quiet moments you carry with you long after the interaction ends. You find yourself wanting more of those conversations, looking forward to seeing him, feeling a charge in the air when you're around him. What you may not realize is that your sense of comfort is giving way to something more electric, more visceral, more embodied. The spark that you thought wasn't there is suddenly alive, and it's directly tied to how safe, connected, and emotionally seen you've felt in his presence. Suppressed attraction doesn't just disappear, it buries itself in the layers of your behavior, your thoughts, your reactions, and often reveals truths about deeper needs you haven't yet voiced. It might show up as irritation towards someone you're secretly drawn to, or as overcompensation in how much you try to convince yourself you're not interested. You keep saying, "He's just a friend," while overthinking every word he says. You feel your heart race when you see his name pop up, but dismiss it as excitement over a good conversation. What's actually happening is a quiet conflict between what you're feeling and what you're allowing yourself to acknowledge. Attraction, when pushed down or denied, doesn't lose its power. In fact, it can become even more potent in the background. It colors your perception of someone. It turns ordinary moments into emotionally charged experiences. It makes small gestures feel more significant than they are. And underneath it all, it's not just about desire. It's often about a deeper yearning that hasn't found its voice. Maybe it's the desire to feel seen, to feel wanted, to feel safe in intimacy, or to break free from emotional patterns where connection always comes with conditions or fear. When you suppress attraction, you're often not just avoiding feelings toward a specific person, you're avoiding parts of yourself, the parts that crave emotional closeness, the parts that miss the feeling of being desired, the parts that are tired of holding back. These deeper emotional needs can hide under the surface for a long time, especially if you've been conditioned to feel guilty about your desires, or if you've learned to stay in control by never letting yourself get too close. But attraction has a way of slipping through the cracks. You might notice it in the way your mood lifts around someone, in the way your thoughts drift toward him when you're alone, in the subtle jealousy you feel when you see him with someone else, even though you tell yourself it shouldn't matter. These are signals that something inside you wants more than you're letting on, and that desire, whether acted on or not, can teach you so much about where your emotional life is right now. Sometimes suppressed attraction reveals the hunger for connection you've tried to ignore. Sometimes it reveals your fear of vulnerability, of being hurt, of wanting someone who may not feel the same. But it can also reveal your readiness to be more honest with yourself, to embrace the possibility of something real, even if it's messy or uncertain. By examining the feelings you keep shoving aside, you uncover the parts of yourself that are asking to be heard, not just in the context of one relationship, but in the broader sense of how you want to feel, in love, in intimacy, and in your most unfiltered self. Attraction, when left unspoken, often speaks louder through your behavior than any confession ever could. It becomes the lens through which you process your emotions, interpret his actions, and navigate your own boundaries. Ignoring subtle signs of attraction can quietly lead to emotional confusion that feels far more complicated than it needs to be. You go from feeling in control of your emotions to suddenly overthinking every interaction, wondering why you're emotionally charged after a simple conversation, or why being around him feels like both comfort and chaos. When you miss or dismiss these subtle cues, those micro moments where your body and instincts are trying to get your attention, you lose a critical connection to your inner world. The signs were never loud, but they were consistent. The way your energy shifted, the moments you caught yourself watching him longer than usual, the internal narrative that kept returning to him no matter how much you tried to steer it elsewhere. We are taught to trust logic over instinct, especially when it comes to desire. You might find yourself saying, but we're not flirting, or there's no reason to think he feels the same, using those rational thoughts to push away what your body already knows. But logic doesn't always protect you from confusion. It sometimes prolongs it. Attraction that goes unacknowledged doesn't vanish. It gets It might emerge as sudden emotional swings, distancing behaviors, or even obsession over minor details. It's not the attraction that's causing turmoil. It's the disconnection from your awareness of it. You start second-guessing your own feelings. You wonder whether you're imagining the chemistry or whether the closeness you feel is one-sided. You can't tell if you want more or if you're just overanalyzing, and that indecision becomes exhausting. Ignoring the early signs means you haven't given yourself the opportunity to process what this connection might actually mean to you. Instead of feeling empowered by your emotions, you start to feel controlled by them. This confusion isn't just about romance. It touches deeper aspects of how you relate to yourself. It reflects a habit of silencing what you feel in favor of what you think you should feel. But when you override those subtle emotional indicators, you start detaching from your own emotional compass. You stop trusting yourself. And when you stop trusting yourself, it becomes even harder to navigate intimacy in a grounded, honest way. There's also a relational cost to ignoring these signs. The other person often picks up on the tension, even if you haven't said a word. Energy is contagious, and attraction, even when unspoken, creates a dynamic that both people can feel. When that dynamic is ignored or denied, it creates distance. It can even lead to miscommunication, mixed signals, or frustration on both sides. What started as a natural emotional or physical response becomes a confusing game of overcompensation or withdrawal. By staying disconnected from your own feelings, you risk creating an emotional fog where clarity should live. You begin crafting stories to explain your reactions, inventing reasons for the emotional charge and pretending it's something else entirely. But deep down, your body already knows the truth. It's just waiting for your mind to catch up and allow space for the full picture to emerge. Becoming aware of your own desire is the beginning of stepping into a more empowered, grounded version of yourself. So often, people move through life disconnected from what they truly feel, especially when it comes to attraction. We second-guess our instincts, downplay our desires, and talk ourselves out of what we want before we even allow ourselves to want it. But the moment you begin to acknowledge your attraction, not just to someone else, but to the way they make you feel, the energy they stir up inside you, you start reclaiming your power. That awareness isn't just about naming the desire, it's about owning your experience without shame or fear. This isn't about acting on every feeling or turning every attraction into a relationship. It's about tuning in to what your emotions and physical responses are trying to show you. When you become conscious of your desire, you start making choices instead of running on autopilot. You stop reacting and start responding. You get to decide what feels healthy, what feels mutual, what deserves to be explored, and what's best left unspoken. Without that awareness, you're more likely to be pulled into situations you didn't choose consciously, only to look back and wonder how you got there. There's an emotional clarity that comes from simply saying to yourself, I'm attracted to this person. That doesn't mean you need to pursue them, confess anything, or even change how you interact. But in recognizing it, you stop the inner tug of war. You stop denying or avoiding your feelings, and that alone brings peace. The mental noise begins to quiet. You no longer need to invent reasons for your behavior or explain away the intensity of your reactions. You can just be honest with yourself, which is one of the most powerful forms of self-respect. When you know what you feel, you protect yourself from self-sabotage. You stop falling into confusing emotional dynamics where unspoken attraction turns into mixed signals, tension, or unnecessary heartbreak. You stop giving your time and energy to connections that are rooted in denial or confusion. Instead, you become intentional. Even if the desire remains private, your internal relationship with it becomes cleaner, clearer, and less reactive. This awareness also teaches you a lot about your own emotional needs. What is it about this person that drew you in? Was it the way they made you feel seen? Was it the confidence they carried? Was it the way they listened? The safety in their presence? The vulnerability they showed? Your attraction becomes a mirror, reflecting back what you're craving in your own emotional world. Sometimes it points to a type of connection you're ready for. Sometimes it exposes a wound you haven't healed. Either way, it holds wisdom. Wisdom you can only access if you're honest enough to admit what's really going on inside you. Your desire, when acknowledged, becomes a guide rather than a ghost. It doesn't need to control you, but it can inform you. It can show you where you're emotionally alive, where you feel most like yourself, where your boundaries start and where they're ready to evolve.